I like to start with blessing with bracha for study. So if you know it, join along. You don't have to unmute. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Okay, so please feel free to use the chat. I threw in that test message on the side. If you have questions or thoughts, you can turn on your chat on the bottom of the window. Typically, this is obviously a strange format. Typically, we're sitting around a table, and it's a lot less lecture and a lot more seminar, a lot more give and take. I am very dedicated to give and take, so please feel free to either use the chat or unmute and say, hold it, what is that? And especially if I use a term or something like that, where you say, wait a minute, slow down a second. I don't know what that means, you know? And don't feel funny about saying that, because there are times when that's, you know, that's like if I just come out and say, we're gonna study Middat, HaRachamim, and Middat, HaDin. And some of you will not even know what Middat or HaDin or Rachamim means. So, you know, please don't feel shy about asking questions or throwing in or arguing, which is our legacy. So this can be an extremely Talmudic discussion. It's what we all kind of thrive on. Anyway, so I hope you all got the source sheet from Mark. And it is longer than what we'll be able to cover tonight. I did want to give a little bit of extra source because I think that they're valuable to have. But we will probably wind up getting into depth on a few of them, and the others we'll just kind of allude to. So let's get started with what the topic actually is, okay? And I think I said how it informs our behavior. I don't know if that was the best way of putting it. I was at loss for a verb. I think that we could probably say, you know, that's a good title, or we could just get into what these are and just how we live these every day and how we want to live these going forward is really, I think, what I'm interested in, especially given that this is an Elul topic. Okay, so a midah, I think in modern Hebrew, midah is a size. It's also an aspect or characteristic. And rachamim, a lot of us know from rachmanus or rachmanut, right? Compassion or mercy. And HaDin is judgment. Din is judgment. And we know that, or many of us know that Rosh HaShana is Yom HaDin, the day of judgment. It's not usually called Yom HaRachamim. It's called Yom HaDin, in addition to other words. If I had my druthers, I would probably put a little amendment to Yom HaDin and say Yom HaDin parenthesis with some Rachamim to balance out the Din. Because I think that ultimately that's what we're hoping for, is that judgment is tempered, or not even tempered, probably even not overwhelmed, but there's more rachamim than there is din. So I wanted to start with the beginning of the source sheet, which is Genesis 2:4. And it actually will also, we'll use the first two sources because Rashi on Genesis 1:1 brings in 2:4. So Rashi talks about this verse in 2:4. So here's 2:4. Such is the story. Ela toldot HaShamayim, the generations of HaShamayim v'ha'aretz v'hir ba'am, when they were created, the heavens and the earth. B'yom asot Adonai Elohim eretz v'shamayim, when the Lord God made heaven and earth. Now that's not this incredible statement, right? We say Adonai Elohim made heaven and earth. That's sure. Except for all of Genesis 1 only says Elohim. There's no mention of Adonai. There's none of this tetragrammaton, right? The Yud Hey Vav Hey doesn't exist. You say, well, what happened? Where did this Adonai come from? You know, and the rabbis will always look at an anomaly and they'll seize on it. So after how many verses are in there? Chapter 1, 32 verses, I think, in chapter 1, even though verses are later. But there's a lot of text where you have Elohim, 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 and Elohim has created everything. And that's it. And all of a sudden you get another name, Adonai. So they'll say, wait, what's that about? Where does that come from? So Rashi gives an explanation, which is based on rabbinic thought, based on Talmudic thought, although it doesn't seem to be specifically stated this way until Rashi, but the rabbis allude to it constantly. And so Rashi on 1:1, it does not state bara Adonai, the Lord created, because at first God intended to create it, the world, under the attribute of strict justice, order. But he realized that the world could not thus endure. You think about it, if it's only about order and only about justice and only about discipline, we go out of our minds, right? No matter what you did, it would be terrible if you broke the rule. So what did God do? God therefore gave precedence to divine mercy, allying it with divine justice. It is to this that what is written in Genesis 2:4 alludes, in the day that the Lord God made earth and heaven. Okay, there it is. Rashi so eloquently puts it. And the thing is, even if it doesn't say this in the Torah, and if you read through the Torah, and if you say, okay, I'm going to read the Torah, I'm going to find every instance of Elohim and every instance of Adonai. And you would expect that in every instance of Adonai, there's mercy or compassion. And the opposite for Elohim. It's actually not true. It's frequent, but it's not exactly 100% that way. But what the rabbis do is the rabbis will, and then of course going through toward Rashi, Abarbanel, and later, they're going to say, you know what, in an overwhelming amount of circumstances, we're going to use Adonai here as the aspect of compassion. That's what that name implies. And depending on who you believe, there are either 72 or 105 names of God, or however many names of God, right? It's kind of for me, it's very funny in Talmudic that we can't even agree on how many names of God there are, 72, 105, this or that. But we have a lot of different names of God. And what in our classical commentary we find is that each of those names are going to get an aspect. So Melech Malchei Hamlachim is the sovereign of sovereigns. It's the sovereignty of God, et cetera, et cetera. Here we have this compassion. And if you think about it, or at least as I think about it, it's yin and yang in some ways. It's Yetzer Tov and Yetzer Ra in some ways, the aspects of the inclinations toward good and following our passions and letting those take us over. It's also, in many ways, the manual for parenting, like Stam, right there. Because as a parent or a teacher-student, and you can look at it as a deity and a deity, or a sovereign and their subjects, the deity and the people who worship that deity. It's about relationships that have a power dynamic in them. And in that power dynamic, you're saying, we are going to balance discipline and compassion. We're going to balance this need for order and compassion. And as I've been a parent now for 18 and a half years, with two teenage girls, my need for Middat Rachamim in many cases is extreme over Middat HaDin. And I think a lot of us, we look at our parenting or our teaching or anything with power, if we're a boss or something like that, and we think, how exactly do we do this? How exactly do we set up this relationship? And so the balance between, and actually in some ways a little bit more rachamim than din, so that we lean toward the compassionate, is very important. Now I say that recognizing that, and the rabbis will pick up on this as well and say, too much compassion leads to anarchy, right? You can't be totally compassionate. You need boundaries. And I think that many of us would probably indict our society for saying that our parenting is a little bit too Middat Rachamim and needs a little bit more Middat HaDin. But I don't want to get into the parenting blog here. We could do that another time. Okay. Anyway, so that's kind of the overview here for me, like the backdrop for everything. And like I said, if anybody has thoughts or questions or wants to comment or add or subtract, please Feel free. Okay, good. I don't see anybody unmuting. That probably means I should continue. So let's look at the next source. And it's a different kind of take on the same concept from a Barbanel. Right. And actually, I want to use this especially as another personal kavanah as we move forward. Because again, what I want to do is, I think we're all looking at this as Elul, and we are a week and a half from Rosh HaShana and from the Yamim Noraim, the days of awe, and we want to, at least for me, I want to say, what is it that's going to help me as we move forward in the year? So here's a Barbanel. My understanding of the Chazal is the HaRachamim Zichrono Livracha, those are sages, Talmudic sages, is that Elohim represents the attribute of Din. We've already looked at that, meaning that the Holy One wished to create the world with this attribute of Din, which rules that the universe should remain constantly the way it was created without changing in any way. This is the baseline. For this proper Din, with which to be upkept by its blessed creator. And in fact, many times our sages use the term Middat HaDin to mean the natural order that continues according to the way it was set up. It's an interesting take. It's very different from the idea of just strict order. It's not only that strict order, but it's strict order. It's like, this is the way it is. This is the way that it always was. This is the way it's supposed to be going forward. Now, I would say, being a Silicon Valley person, I would say that Middat HaRachamim now is going to be what we would call here disruption, right? Disruption is that buzzword. I kind of know what it means. I don't know what design thinking means, but I do know what disruption means, okay? Disruption. Middat HaRachamim, though, is how they refer to the changing of nature. There's nothing more disruptive than that. The supernatural, breaking the laws of nature, which God does in God's compassion toward the people and devoted ones. It's like, wow, that to me is a very different understanding from just strict compassion. You messed up. We're going to look at that in a little bit. You messed up, and I should destroy you, like in the golden calf, but I won't. That's compassion, right? I'm not going to, because I have compassion for you. Well, this is a different kind of compassion here. This is a compassion of, I'm going to break the laws of nature. I made the world this way. This is the way it always is, and always was, and always should be. And I'm going to do it a little different, because that's what the people need. That's why I call it disruption. I think about, actually, just as somebody whose life is in a synagogue, right? And it is very easy for many synagogues to for many organizations, forget synagogues, to fall into, this is the way it always has been. That's why we do it that way. It's very easy for us as human beings to fall into a pattern of, this is what I do. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with a lot of those things that we do. It's what we do, and it seems to have worked so far. But it may not be getting us to our essential self. It also may be that we're doing things that are either destructive to ourselves or others, unknowingly. To ourselves, sometimes we say it's unknowing, but it actually is knowing. We'll get into that a little bit later. Or we're doing things that just keep us stagnant, or we keep status quo because it's comfortable. And again, it's nothing per se wrong with comfort. I'm not denigrating comfort. I like my comfortable life. However, there are times when we need to be a little bit different. We need to say, you know what? I know this is the way it's always been, but I could flourish. I could thrive if there was just a little bit more, if I changed things, if I disrupted, if I broke those laws. Right here it's saying God is breaking the laws of nature. So maybe it's something that is going to help me as I go forward to say, Middat Rachamim, it's a different take on Rachamim and on compassion. We don't think of compassion in that way generally, but it's saying that we're acting in our own best interests. So it's a redefinition that I'm using here. Pardon me. I'm just going to mute for a sec because I have to cough. Okay, going on. Thus, their statement is that God wanted to create the world with Middat HaDin, so it would continue without alteration. But since God saw it would not survive like this, for certain times call for novel creations and violations of nature. So again, it's also in response to outside forces, And I think that, especially given the way the world is at times, well, certainly now, where we go through a lot of dissonance, and sometimes floating through life where we were is not the best way to go. And that we need to think about what are the changes we need to make to the nature that we have created for ourselves at this time. Okay, so he stipulated that creation. So I'm flipping to down a little bit to the last part of this. It says God created after the Adonai Elohim, Hashem Elohim, created them with the stipulation that God may change them whenever they're in need. And thus, God leads the universe with Middat HaDin regularly and employs Middat HaRachamim when it is necessary. Now, I would argue that we probably need more than just, or not that we need more than is necessary, but that necessary is more than we think it is. In other words, here it seems that Abarbanel is saying most of the time it's just Middat HaDin. Most of the time it's our regular routine. It's our nature. And then when we need it, we employ Middat HaRachamim. And I would say, again, kind of in the world I live, where it is easy for an organization to become a little bit stagnant, or my personality be a little stagnant, I need to be almost constantly thinking about it. The problem with that is that if I'm always thinking about how to change, and I'm not actually doing my job that I have, I want to do a little bit better, but I want to do the job that I have. So it's something where we're constantly thinking about it, but then at a certain point, we here will sit down, our clergy team, our senior team, and say, all right, let's think about every single thing that we do. Let's think about how it's working. How could it work better? What are the things we could do to change? So that's just taking an analogy of an organizational analogy, which is, you know what, we have the ability to change. And when we need to change, we should change. So our regular routine is Middat HaDin. It's that order we've established. But our disruption, our change, and our examination of that is going to be the Middat HaRachamim. Okay. Whew. Thoughts, comments, solutions, problems, questions, arguments, nothing? I mean, it's perfectly okay not to, but I just want to open it up. Make sure I'm not. Unmute. You're still muted, Marcia.
Okay, I'm okay. So I'm grappling with this concept that Abarbanel has of that Hashem can change us whenever we need it.
Yeah.
And I don't see from Torah, I can't bring down Torah for examples of this. That is this an innate change in us, or I'm just not getting it.
Good. What I would say is that it's in my theological worldview here, that it's not God actively changing us per se. It's us changing, and whether that's with a view toward God and how we might want to change to be more godly or to have God more in our everyday, or if it's simply independent, but us being like God. And so what I would say here is, this is my thing. I would say that with Abarbanel, he's almost certainly being much more active. God is actively making that change. In my view, I would say that it's my acting in a godly fashion. It's taking something where if you're saying, okay, this is a power of God to change things, I'm saying if God has a power to change things, I have the power to change things, right? And kind of going off the Tselem Elohim with God being in God's image and saying, listen, God clothed the naked, I clothed the naked, God fed the hungry, I fed the hungry. God can make changes to what is the order that's been established. I can do that. What I wanted to do with this is really, just using the organizational analogy and the disruption analogy, is to say, I want to take this into my own power, right? I want to actually do it. And this is a very different take, from the classical Middat Rachamim, Middat HaDin. But I'm saying that I want to do it and say, okay, God has that ability to change in a theological sense. Sure, I don't see evidence of it, but possibly. But I will say I have the ability to change, and I know I can do that.
So in other words, first you need the recognition of the fact that you need to change. And
I think that's right.
And then after that, acting as a godly agent, we can actually bring about the change in ourselves, in our community, etc.
Beautifully put. I think that's exactly right.
Okay, good.
That's exactly how I see it. And I think that a big piece of it is, which I mentioned, but I want to just say again, is the introspection, right? Like I can't change unless I know I need to, or I can't change unless I see that there's, a goal that I can reach if I do. And that's what Elul is. Ultimately we're saying, ultimately this whole period is I want to be better. I want to not do destructive things that I did, which probably are fewer than we think they are. But I'd also want to enhance the positive things I did, which is kind of part of this as well. So yeah, but what you said was exactly that way. Good. Yeah, Jan.
So Rashi's comment is sort of along the lines that God went through the same experience. At the beginning, in chapter 1, he was the God of justice, sort of a hands-off God.
Yeah.
And somehow he saw that wasn't working out.
Uh-huh.
And so now we have chapter 2, let's rethink this. So God said, I have to bring a little mercy into this.
I'm writing this down, Jan, because the wording of that, like God saw that this wasn't working out. Now I have to change, which shows a learning God. I love that.
Well, that's what I take from Rashi's comment.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah, learning God. When I use that in my next talk, I'm giving you credit. Good. Others? Okay. All right. The next text is, I don't want to spend a ton of time on it except for one little piece, okay? Because the next text is one of the reasons why the rabbis will pick up on Adonai, the Yud He Vav He, being the aspect of compassion. Okay, it's actually the reason. And so there's this, in what do they call it, biblical exegesis. Is there, as people are interpreting Torah, the hermeneutic approach to Torah. I love those words, hermeneutics, exegesis. Great. So when the rabbis are looking at Adonai, there's only one place where you have Adonai twice. This is it, right? It's Exodus 34 here, and it's in conjunction with a whole bunch of things that are compassion, right? So they say, Adonai, Yud He Vav He, the tetragrammaton, the ineffable name of God, is the one that's about compassion. Because there's compassion and gracious and slow to anger, bounding in kindness, faithfulness, and in kindness, etc. So that's where it comes from. This whole idea of Adonai being the Middat HaRachamim. The piece of this that I want to look at, and this is actually something that's more technical for it's not even technical, it's spiritual, for our prayers, for our experience with the holidays, whether we're praying by ourselves or with a community, which is that, as you read this, it says, forgiving iniquity, transgression, and sin. For some reason, the translation, which I took, left out, all right, after the word sin in Exodus 34:6, right, about 7 lines down, and remitting punishment. Okay, that's not v'nakeh. And that says, yet he does not remit all punishment, but visits the iniquity of parents upon children and children's children upon the 3rd and 4th generations. Okay? So, we sing this in synagogue. Most of us knows Adonai, Adonai, HaRachamim v'chanun, right? And it ends with Notzei Avon v'afeshet v'chata v'nakeh, and it ends there. And you'll notice then it says Lo Yinakeh. It doesn't. Like, wait a minute. We didn't sing that. We went on at that point. We went on to Vani Tfilati or to Yom Hashem Slachti Levat, whatever. Like, what happened to that? Do you know what happened? You know what happened? This was our rabbis. Go, Marsha.
We couldn't stand it. We couldn't stand that concept, so we had to change it.
Good. Okay. The rabbis said, hey, wait a minute. Prayer is not about Din. Prayer is about Rachamim. Prayer is not about the strict judgment. Prayer is about us finding compassion and us finding connection to God. It's much harder to connect to God when this God is angry and punishing third and fourth generations. They cut it out. They censored it with a big C. They did that a lot, by the way. They had an agenda. Their agenda was this book. I don't have the Machzor in my hand, but this Machzor, or the Siddur, generally, is about Middat HaRachamim. It's about this amazing connection with a compassionate God. So we're going to take that little piece out. And so this whole paragraph is going to be about compassion. Which that by the way is a whole other class, just studying the Siddur and what the rabbis did with it, with their polemics and such. The next piece, which is Jonah, where he uses pieces of that, right, where it says he at the end of after he prays to God and the gourd and everything else, before the gourd and after the punishment is lifted from Nineveh, he says, "I know that you are El Rachum, El Chanun V'Rachum." I don't know why they switched it. Erech Apayim V'Rav Chesed, V'Nichama Hara'ah. Right, and kind of renounces the evil, the punishment. It's not a bad translation. That these decrees are revocable. All right, but something that's very important, which is in the Exodus passage, the passage from Shemot where it says that God doesn't remit all punishment. That's when you're not. This, by the way, this whole little section is after the golden calf. So Moses is recognizing God's incredible compassion, not destroying the people. And the only reason God doesn't destroy the people is Moses tells him, look, God, you can't destroy the people. You know what the neighbors think, right? Like, you took them out of Egypt for this? Come on. So, in the case of Jonah, it's actually it's a different reason for not destroying. Okay? Why doesn't God destroy the Ninevites? Because they do tshuva. They repent, So there's a difference in the Moses story, with the golden calf. The people really don't do anything to deserve it. God does it because God is God and God is compassionate. They haven't done anything. They haven't come back and said, "Oh, wow, that was a big mistake. We're so sorry. God will only worship you. We'll never build another idol. We'll never complain again." Right? That doesn't happen. But in the case of the Ninevites, they do. They fast for 3 days. Even the cattle are fasting, which is pretty interesting. Okay? And, the decree that God issues is revocable, but not because they have a great leader, Moses. It's revocable because of the people's actions. We read this at the end of Yom Kippur, basically, right? It's Mincha Yom Kippur. We read the book of Jonah. It's an amazing message to say at the end of Yom Kippur, after you fasted for about 20 hours and you've davened for about probably 10, I don't know, however many hours, right? And you've looked inside yourself for every hour that you haven't been sleeping. And you read this or you listen to this Haftorah and you read along. And at the end of this Haftorah, at the end of this portion of the prophets, it says, your behavior matters, right? It said, what does he say? I know that you're a compassionate and gracious God. That's why I ran away from you in the first place. It's like, don't run away. The message is don't run away from that compassionate God. Run to that compassionate God. Our behavior matters. Our whole, we don't waste 40 days between Elul and the Yamim Noraim, just to be the same that we were when we started. You can't be exactly the same. You have to move forward. The Jonah passage says, this God issues a revocable decree. And that our behavior matters. At the end of this whole source sheet, I don't know if you had a chance to flip through all 5 pages of the source sheet, or I think the PDF made it 7 pages, whatever, -5. Anyway, at the end is Unatana Tokef, which I do want to get to because it's the absolute core, I think it's the core theology of the day. It's certainly the most shaking, it gets our teeth. This is the one that sets our teeth on edge, like you say in Pesach with the wicked child. This sets our teeth on edge. Anyway, let's actually skip over to that. So let's go to the very end. Let's look at an Atonement because I don't want to get a short shrift. So it's the last piece, and then at the end, what I want to do is just return to the Gemara, where there's an incredible Agadah, incredible story. Anyway, here it is, Unatana Tokef. Now, the story of Unatana Tokef is, it is a poem. It is unknown exactly when it was written. There are people who say it was 6th century. There are people who say it's 12th century or 14th century, that it was written somewhere in the Middle East, that it was written or in Babylon, that it was written in Germany, in Frankfurt, in response to persecution. It's unclear. It's unclear. But it is a poem, and it is meant to be, it's meant to be a poem. It's meant to be something that is interpreted. It's meant to be something just like a painting, where when you look at the painting, you might understand the intention of the artist, but that's not the entire story of a painting. I love art. I go to art museums a lot. And actually, and this is just a quick commercial. If you don't know this source, there's a source called Tali Virtual Midrash, okay? Or Visual Midrash, Tali Visual Midrash. Tali Visual Midrash is this incredible resource of paintings and sculptures of biblical scenes. It's absolutely fantastic because paintings and pictures are midrash. I'm going to send you the link. Okay, the link is now in everyone's chat. And so, before the holidays for sure, but before Shabbat and Torah readings, take a look at this. So, for example, on Rosh HaShana day 2, we'll read about the Akedah, right, the binding of Isaac. On day 1, we'll read about the sending away of Hagar. There are paintings and sculptures and etchings and drawings in this archive, right? And that those are midrashim, and we are visual people. It's funny, we're the people of the book, right? The Jews are the people of the book. We're actually, as people, we're the people of the image, because when we hear a story, we immediately form an image. I have a little thing. So I teach 6th grade here on Wednesdays, which is both incredibly stimulating and a cross to bear. However, we do this thing. We did this yesterday, where I take the kids around the block. We go for a walk around the block, and I tell them the only rule is you can't interact with each other. You have to walk down the sidewalk. It's probably, we walk about, 300 meters total, 1,000 feet. You walk down the block, you make a left up the street, you go into the parking lot. When you get to the parking lot, you can talk to each other again and wave at each other and, be horsing around. But don't do it on this walk. So at the end of it, I have them go to the board and I say, what are we doing? Why are we wasting time? And so I say, here's what you need to do. Go to the whiteboard. I want you all to write down what you experienced on the walk. Okay? And for the kids who actually take it seriously, which is a majority, 80% of what they say that they experienced was visual, using sight. Probably about 15% is hearing, tiny bit of smell, a little bit of feel. The only feel that they get is that there's, we have those cushy sidewalks because of the roots. So they'll, we love the sidewalk, but 80%, and this is every year, it's visual, okay? When we read a poem, the poem is supposed to evoke an image. And the image in Unatana Tokef, well, there are several of them we're going to go through, okay? This good poetry, this is a good poem. This is not an easy poem. This is a poem to argue with, which makes it an even better poem in my book, okay? When I agree with the poem, it's not as good. When I'm mad at the poem, it's amazing, because then I can say, I don't believe this, or etc. Anyway, we lend power to the holiness of this day, for it is tremendous and awe-filled, and on it your kingship will be exalted. Your throne will be established in chesed, and you'll sit on that throne in truth. They did a nice thing for us here in Sefaria, which is they broke it into 6 pieces, okay? So from the very beginning, it is an awesome, powerful day. God is sitting on a throne, but this is the topic sentence. with the topic paragraph. The throne is established in chesed. Okay, we can't lose that. We can't lose that. The entire high holiday period, the entire period of Elul, Yamim Noraim, which is very serious, by the way. Okay, it's very joyful at the end of Yom Kippur, but it's a very serious time because we're looking inside ourselves. We're making ourselves vulnerable to ourselves. Okay, and as hard as it is to be vulnerable to other people, it's really hard to be vulnerable to ourselves. We're making ourselves vulnerable, and we're saying we're going to now go before HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed is God, who's sitting there in chesed. Okay, judgment is couched in chesed. Middat HaRachamim is the overarching piece of Middat HaDin here. That's something to really keep in mind, especially as we kind of go forward through this. It is true that you are the one who judges. Emet, Yatahu Dayan. You're the one who judges, and you reprove God, and you know all. And you bear witness, you inscribe and seal, reckon, and enumerate. God is the police officer who's arrested us and then prosecuted us and judged us. You know, you see what we've done. And maybe you've judged us nicely on it. It's good. And who seals, who reckons and enumerates. You remember all that is forgotten. You open the book of records and from it all shall be read. In it lies each person's insignia. Whew. That's heavy. That's serious. Marcia, what you said before about a Barvanel, right? I don't really see God actively doing this particular thing. Okay. Now, I'm not going to say God is not doing all this in this poem, but I will tell you as a teacher, I generally try not to give my own opinion, if you will, my own theology, but I do want to give it here. I do want to say how I'm reading the text and welcome you to read it differently, of course, which is I read this as not so much God, because if God is the one who knows all, okay? So why don't I just say, why don't I take it to a different omniscient source, a different source who knows all about my life? Who is that source? Right. Me. I know everything. I know what I did. I might sublimate it. I might justify it. I might rationalize it. I might excuse it. But I know you can't BS yourself. Ultimately, you can't. Okay? So what I do is I read this and I say, it is true that you are the one who judges and reproves. I would change that as I do this tefillah. It says, I who judges and reproves. I know all. I bear witness. I inscribe. I seal. I reckon. I enumerate. I remember all that's forgotten. When I do that work for 30 days, I remember what I forgot. I remember that I was really a jerk to somebody. I remember that I was so insensitive to that one kid who couldn't read the Torah properly. I remember, right? We can make the list. If we're really honest, okay, the rabbinic concept of God in the Talmud, and they say this over and over again, is there is no hiding from God. There are no secrets. Public and private to God are the same. Okay, you can't just say, oh, I did it at home, it's fine. Nobody will see. And God sees it. Well, let's take it out of God again. I see it. I know. I remember all it's forgotten. I open the book of records and I read. And I know what I've done. And I know what the bed that I've made is. Now I got to figure out, what is that bed like? You know, because I got to tell you, sometimes my bed is really kind of nice. Last year, Michelle and I looked at our tzedakah and we said, you know what? We're doing okay. We could do a little more. It's not easy. We could do a little more. And we did. Like, for me, you know, that was a really nice thing. We tend to dwell on the negative, you know, like, oh, such a jerk to that person. Why don't we judge both things? What can I do a little bit better even? What can I do better that I haven't done well? But what can I do even a little bit better and make myself a little bit better? I'm judging my own self here. And I think like that read for me works, okay? However, go back to paragraph 1. Your throne will be established in chesed. So now I'm looking at paragraph 2, and I'm inserting myself, my own self-judgment. By the way, again, I'm not saying God doesn't judge us. I'm not saying God is not the ultimate judge. That's for everybody to make their own personal theological decision. What I'm saying for me is, I'm going to judge myself now, but I need to still have chesed for myself. Because you know what? Maybe I was having a bad day. Not that it excuses it, but it mitigates it a bit. Maybe I was sick. Maybe somebody was really nasty to me. Maybe the person deserved it, you know? So let me give myself a little break and then say, okay, I could have dealt with it better. But let me not totally beat myself up over this. So my self-beating, my self-flagellation is a little bit modified. Okay, and by the way, this is not supposed to be a self-flagellatory exercise, but it's kind of what we do as people, I think. Anyway, okay, before we get to the shofar, thoughts, comments? Marilyn?
I wonder if we read this a third way. So the first way is Hashem speaking, or
Right.
about, that it's Hashem is the judge, etc. And the second way is introspectively, I am my own judge, etc. But what about sort of as a community, as a society? And, I'm trying to figure out like how this can sort of jumpstart our social justice leanings.
Nice.
So, I mean, I think if we read this all as we, and we being let's just say the community, I think we can have some interesting thoughts about that.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Absolutely. I think when we get to the end of this, it's gonna be perfectly aligned with what you just said. Perfectly aligned. I love that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So let's continue, and then let's get to exactly that point. Okay. A great shofar is sounded, and a thin silent voice shall be heard. I grew up with a still small voice, right? Was that the Silverman Machzor? I only like a still small voice. I've read many, many commentaries and translations and scholars who have disagreed. I just like a still small voice. But in any event, how Elijah experienced God. And it kind of just, I'm going to leave this behind a second, but the idea of a great shofar evoking Mount Sinai and other things, and a still small voice, a thin, silent voice, evoking Elijah, two very different ways of experiencing God, which both took place in the exact same location, right at Mount Sinai. And so generally, I look at it as kind of the extremes, this complete quiet and this complete noise, and we're in the middle experiencing God. So there's this range of experience of God. So there's an experience of God that comes here. Let me take these off.
Now. No, not yet. Yes, now. Okay, good. Yeah, it just on. What's going on here? I am not technologically gifted.
Your microphone is in your earpieces.
I know they were running out. I don't know how. No.
But that's how we could hear you, was from your earpieces.
Not now? Now?
Now it's okay.
Yay, I am not technologically gifted. I'm very bad. Okay, so now we're back. Okay. All right, well, these things charge up in about 5 minutes. I don't know if I want to go back to them. In any event, okay. The great shofar is sounded. We have the still small voice. The angel shall be alarmed, and dread and fear shall seize them as they proclaim, behold, the day of judgment, on which the hosts of heaven shall be judged, for they too shall not be judged blameless by you, and all creatures shall parade before you as a herd of sheep. As a shepherd herds his flock, directing his sheep to pass under his staff, so do you shall pass count and record the souls of all living, and decree a limit to each person's days and inscribe their final judgment. When I was a kid, that scared the heck out of me. Oh my gosh. Right, and again, remember the idea of poetry and the imagery. Like, I immediately have that image, that guy with the beard on that big throne. No. Yes, no. I'm like, oh my God. And for like 7 days, I took the garbage out. Like, I was right on point, Because I was afraid, fear goes away after a while. I actually recently was learning this with someone who said, I think the shepherd's amazing. You know, like the shepherd is not scary. Shepherd is pastoral. A shepherd is one who loves each of his sheep. A shepherd goes and chases after the little sheep and takes it back like Moses did. I thought that was lovely. I was still like scared out of my wits when I was 11. But what are you going to do? Anyway, but it does have this idea, this big day we're in now. Okay, this is a big monumental day. And on Rosh HaShana, it is inscribed on Yom Kippur, it is sealed, how many shall pass away and how many shall be born, who shall live and who shall die, who in good time and who by an untimely death, who by water, who by fire, etc., 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 who at peace and pursued, who impoverished and who wealthy, who shall be debased and who exalted. Okay? There are things in there we can control. There are things that we cannot control. That is life. Okay? You can control stopping at a stop sign. You can't control the other person stopping. I mean, I don't want to make this too abased, but that's true. Yeah, Marilyn, please.
I just want to speak to the decree a limit to each person's days, because that's the thing that sort of scares everybody, or the people that get scared, it's probably that. And it's interesting to me because everybody knows, we all know we're going to die. So I'm curious, and this is for me as well as everyone else. We all know we're going to die, so why does that scare us?
Thoughts?
I don't think that we're scared of the fact that we're going to die. I think, as it is stated so forcefully here, how we're going to die.
And when we're going to die.
Good.
I think this is the reason everybody comes to Yom Kippur service.
What's that?
This third paragraph.
Whoa. Oh, the idea of like the limit. So, well, listen, Yom Kippur is it's true. Yom Kippur being a confrontation with our own mortality, right? Built into the kavanah of the day, and wearing white and all that, not eating and being incorporeal. It's a very interesting thing, and it's true, Marilyn. We do all know, and I think that the older we get, the less scary it is, and probably the sadder it is to leave behind those, more and more and more and more people and memories, and also to watch others whom you've lost. But I think it is. I do think it's scary. Even knowing we're mortal is scary for many people. Yeah.
But not to get overly philosophical, but we don't actually know what happens. So why is that scary? I guess it's, the analytical in all of us, but we have no idea.
A friend of ours said,
absolutely true.
A friend of ours said at age 102, if God is good to me, I will go to sleep and not wake up. And that's exactly what happened. And I think that as you get older, this prayer takes on that meaning. We know we're reaching the point where we're no longer talking about God forbid, but rather when the time comes. And so from a very senior perspective, now the prayer is, do not let it be through all of these torturous things. Let me go to sleep and not wake up here, maybe wake up someplace else. Who knows? We don't know.
What you mentioned before about the next paragraph, like kind of the how and all that being the scary part, and what you're just saying, as you're saying that, I'm thinking, this was a poem that was written a long, long, long time ago, right? And if we were to rewrite it today, we would say, who by lengthy disease with many chemo treatments that have debilitated them, and who by, living the length of their days and not waking up, right? Like the things that are just horrible, and then the things that are not, just a better way and that more natural way. It's very interesting, right? That we would then project, and I think we always project our own, circumstances or other circumstances close to us. And so we project it on that, right? And that is scary. But the other piece of this, which Marilyn mentioned, which is, we don't know what's next, right? And, most people here in classes that I've been part of are less focused on the world to come and kind of not as certain of the world to come, okay, as perhaps a Barbanel, the author of this, Rambam, whatever, or maybe in a more orthodox theology, although that's hard to pin down. But we don't know, And so for some, it is comfort. And as you said, Marcia, it's certainly comfort if it's, the length of your days and you're ready, and you don't want any kind of suffering. That's true. This is the heavy piece of the whole pie. Yeah, go.
In a larger sense, though, we're talking about we and who. And there's so many of these things that we know now that we can avert. And it's not only by prayer and by tshuva and by maybe tzedakah. We certainly can prevent a lot of famines from happening. We certainly can prevent, in the long run, more severe storms happening. So in a sense, it's talking to us as a community too. So
Good.
It's back to what you were saying about putting ourselves in the place of God, doing the godly work.
Good. And that goes back to the community that was mentioned before. Marilyn, did you have something? Oh, okay. Yeah, let's just go to that last sentence, okay? Because you said, it's not always going to be that these things are going to work, right? The last thing, where it says u'teshuva u'tefila u'tzedakah, but teshuva, they always say repentance. I like to say turning or returning, right? Striving for the ideal and turning toward that, because shuv is to turn or return. But teshuva, tefillah, which is with prayer, and tzedakah, righteousness, righteous giving, whatever, both good, avert the severity of the decree, or mavirin. Like to avert is good, like to kind of pass over the severity or make it lessened in some way, abate it. I actually, and this was back to the point of the community here, right? And I loved that, God, I, we. Because I think actually in this very statement, it's I, God, we. Okay? Tshuva is an I. And I think that, in terms of a blueprint for myself, the first thing is I got to get myself in order. I, tshuva. I do my introspection of who am I? It goes back to, God is the judge, etc. And I said, listen, that's me judging myself. That's me not hiding. That's me being vulnerable. Tshuva is the I part of that. Tefillah is the Hashem part, the God part, right? Because God is the other partner in prayer. And tzedakah is everyone else. And it starts with me, and then I look to God for my guidance, and then I say, now I'm going to go help the world. Well, looking to God is basically doing the mitzvot, saying God is the one who's the source of mitzvot. It doesn't, by the way, have to be a long conversation, honestly, because it doesn't. Long conversations in prayer don't work for everyone, honestly, right? And they do work for some, but to say, okay, I'm just going to say yes. What is it that God wants from me, even if I don't believe in God? What is it that makes God's presence really full for me? How do I become godly? That's tefillah, by doing tzedakah, by doing righteous acts. And so I think that actually those three words just put the puzzle together, and they take the different aspects. And I love the idea that this is also a we, that kind of I, self, community, society, we. I love that. And I think that ultimately in all, not only Rosh Hashanah, not only Yom Kippur, not only all the holidays and Shabbat, I think every time we look at a prayer book or we think about the prayers that we've been given, I think every single time this is something we have to have in mind, the rest of the world. Let me just go back again to the kids, my sixth graders, because they say, what are we learning in here? What are we doing in here? Kids always ask that. And they always say, well, we don't want to learn anything. So I told them the class is about Ness. Okay? This is just my quick 1-minute sermon. My 1-minute sermon is that Ness in Hebrew, which we know is miracle from Hanukkah, but miracle in English is different. Miracle in English is, it's that part of, like the HaRachamim that Abarbanel talked about, changing the natural order. And only God has that power, and it's something that's just outside of the cosmos. You part a sea or something like that. That's not what Ness is. And we know that because in our prayer book, it says to God in the Amidah, we say, we thank you, God, for all the Ness, all the miracles that you've given us that are with us every day. So I don't see a miracle every day. It's like nobody's seeing Ness, because what Ness is not the act. It's our reaction and observation of the act. It's our awe and wonder of the act. That's why we say blessings. Blessings are response to Ness. Right? You eat. Food is a Ness. You study. Study is a Ness. These are things that fill us with wonder and awe. A rainbow is a Ness. A beautiful smell is a Ness. Right? That's why there's that saying, you should say 100 brachot a day, 100 blessings a day. It's a beautiful saying, right? It's not an exact number. It's show Ness. Show that you recognize Ness. And the bracha, we have them in the book. I'll be very honest with you. Cards on the table. I cannot remember the rainbow blessing. I can't. I have a mental block. I know Motzi. I know La Sokbidi Rich. I can list you all the blessings I know. But I don't know the rainbow blessing. I just can't remember it. So the last time I saw a rainbow, and it wasn't the last time, but the last time that I decided I'm not going to look for the blessing was the time when I saw a rainbow, and I pulled out my phone, and I Googled rainbow bracha. And what I realized was I was looking at my phone, not looking at the rainbow. Idiot. So I just said, wow, that became my bracha, because the bracha could also be freeform, right? That can be just kavanah, not keva. But the point is, for me, the point is that this is something in terms of kind of moving forward also. When you do all these things, I want to bring it back to the community aspect. When you start to see Ness in things, you also start to see lack of Ness, right? You see the climate changing. You see fires. You see homeless people. You see all these things that contradict Ness. I'm saying a bracha after I eat. Why? Because I'm satiated and I want to recognize that I had the food, but I also want to recognize people who don't have food. My whole blessing part here is to try and connect me to the rest of the world. And very much is the third part of this stool, the community aspect. And I would say if there's anything in here that's the most important to me, it is the community aspect. But I got to get my own stuff in order first. And I can still be a little bit off, but I need to continue, my own work as well. Anyway, I know we're kind of going a little bit short on time. Do we have a few more minutes? Or Judy, did you? Oh, you going? Okay. I'm going to take just 2 more minutes, okay? I just want to bring you this one piece of the Talmud, which is before. There is a lot more we have here, but go backwards. Go backward to the thing where it says Brachot 7a. All right. Brachot 7a. The Gemara asks, what does God pray? The rabbis, by the way, have this great discussion. They're talking about God prays. Everybody knows God prays. They also have something that says, everybody knows God puts on tefillin. I love that one, And they say, well, what's written in God's tefillin? They're doing all this stuff. Anyway, what does God pray? Well, may it be my will that my mercy will overcome my anger. Here it is. This is what the rabbis want us to think that God is saying. May my mercy prevail over my other attributes, and may I conduct myself toward my children Israel with the attribute of mercy, and may I enter before them beyond the letter of the law. Woo! Middat HaRachamim over Middat HaDin, but then we got to read this little Agada. This is one of the greatest stories for me in the whole Talmud. maybe in the whole world, because the Talmud is so Talmud. It was taught in a Baraita, the Rabbi Yishmael ben Elisha, the high priest. So this guy is a big rabbi. He's also the high priest, Kohen Gadol. Once on Yom Kippur, I entered the innermost sanctum, the Holy of Holies, to offer incense. And in a vision, I saw Katriel Yah, the Lord of Hosts, which is one of the names of God. And he's sitting on a high and exalted throne. And he said to me, Yishmael, my son, bless me. Now, one of the things I have brought this to lots of people. Teenagers are great with this one, younger people. It's good for everyone, which is, what would you say, right? You're sitting there and God says to you, bless me. What would you say? I said to him, may it be your will that your mercy overcome your anger. And may your mercy prevail over your other attributes. And may you act toward your children with the attribute of mercy. And may you enter before them beyond the letter of the law. The Holy One nodded his head and accepted the blessing. Now, for me, that is such a cool vision. The rabbis have all sorts of crazy visions. I mean, this is just such a beautiful vision. I think that, once again, just coming back to this, is our ability to act in a godly fashion, right? If we are acting in a godly fashion, most of us know that section of Talmud which says, just as God did this, we do this. Just as God buries the dead, we bury the dead. Just God, visit the sick, we visit the sick. But just as God has more compassion than anger, letter of the law, etc., we should. That chesed, again, God's throne is established. We're going to walk before it, but it is established with chesed. And for me, that is pretty much, that's it. That is what I need to practice toward others, but certainly toward myself. Anyway, thank you, everybody. Thank you for being part of this.